Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. As folks continue to join, let's just take a moment to appreciate that classic Love Train. Oh, be on repeat. I love it. Let's take a moment to appreciate the classic Love Train by the OJs. I love that we're starting with this song because radical love, transformative love is really at the heart of Jedi work. It's very important for us to recognize in times like these, when the political and social landscape feels uncertain, love reminds us of our shared humanity. If there were more love guiding our institutions, policies, and business decisions, I truly believe our world would be more balanced, more just, and more equitable. So welcome. Thank you for that selection. It definitely started my morning really on a high level, on a high frequency, and I just want to welcome everyone. Again, my name is Hugh Signey Jr., and I am joining you today on behalf of B-Lab US and Canada. Before we begin, I want to invite you to take a deep breath. Let's be present with one another, and let's reconnect to our why. Why do we show up for justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, not just in our work, but in our communities, our leadership, and our personal lives? Today is about reaffirming that why and reminding ourselves that even amidst growing resistance, this work is more necessary than ever. I would like to also take a moment. Cal, can you go to the previous slide, please? Thank you. I'd like to take a moment as we reflect on the state of our world. I want to name something many of us felt during the height of the pandemic, and that was a moment when the B Corp movement truly proved its value. At a time of deep uncertainty, certified B Corps leaned into their values, and many were more resilient because of it. That moment mirrors what we're experiencing now, with growing attacks on JEDI principles and civil rights. And once again, purpose-driven businesses are being called to lead with clarity, courage, and care. Next slide, please. Thank you. So a few housekeeping items before we dive in. Today's session is being recorded, but the breakout rooms will not be. Those smaller conversations are just for you. Closed captioning is available. Just click the CC button on your Zoom control bar. And if you'd like, feel free to rename yourself in Zoom to include your name, organization, and pronouns. We want this space to be both informative and welcoming. Next slide, please. As we ground ourselves, I want to acknowledge the land I'm joining from, the unceded territory of the Lenape people. I honor their stewardship and ongoing presence, and I invite you to share in the chat whose land you're on. If you know, you can also visit native-land.ca or whose.land to learn more. We hold this acknowledgement not as a formality, but as an invitation to remember the history beneath our feet and to carry that awareness into the work we do today. So I'll take a quick second there if folks would like to insert that in the chat. Wonderful. Before we begin, I'd like to uplift where we are in the Collab series. Today is June 18th, and we're diving into justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Next slide, please. Wonderful. So before we dive in, here's a quick look at what we have ahead. We'll begin with our amazing and powerful speakers with Mahalet from Policy Link, who will speak to the current social and political landscape surrounding JEDI, followed by Bernard from B-Lab Global, who will give us a walkthrough of how JEDI is embedded in the standards and certification requirements. After that, we'll move into practice with Maria Velasco, who will share a powerful case study on how B Corps are building internal capacity to operationalize JEDI. And we'll close the speaker portion with Michelle Reed from BDC, who will explore what reconciliation and Indigenous partnership look like in action. Finally, we'll wrap up with Q&A and breakout sessions, giving you the space to connect and dig deeper. Next slide, please. What to expect? To be clear about the scope of today's session, we'll be introducing the JEDI impact topic, sharing examples and best practices, and helping you understand what's required and what's possible. We won't be diving into company-specific certification timelines or details of our assurance model, but if those questions come up, please reach out at any time to community@bcorporation.net, and we'll make sure you get the support you need. All right, let's begin. Well, without further ado, I have the privilege and honor today to open today's session to welcome our first expert, Mahalet Getachew, Managing Director at PolicyLink. Mahalet is a nationally recognized leader in corporate racial equity and policy strategy. She's here to speak directly to the current moment we're all navigating, one filled with political noise, misinformation, and uncertainty. Mahalet, we're honored to have your leadership in guiding us through this conversation. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Hughes. Hello, everyone. It's so wonderful to be with you today. As Hughes mentioned, I lead the corporate program at PolicyLink. PolicyLink is a national research and action institute devoted to advancing racial and economic equity for over 2 decades. Our vision is a future where all people enjoy a dignified standard of living for themselves and their families, build generational wealth, live in healthy communities of opportunity, participate in fair democratic processes, and access what they need to thrive. Most simply, our vision is a society that embodies fairness, well-being, and shared prosperity. As part of my work, I lead the Corporate Racial Equity Alliance, a partnership between PolicyLink, FSG, and Just Capital. We develop tools and resources that support businesses in operating fair workplaces, having a positive impact on communities, and supporting a healthy multiracial democracy. And through all of our research and extensive stakeholder engagement, we know that advancing justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion remains a potent antidote and the most pragmatic path to addressing growing inequality. And the role for business has never been more important than right now, but it has also never been harder. This work is under attack from the highest levels of the US government to many states and bad faith actors who do not want to see a more equal society in the US and beyond. So, what I want to share with you today is how to understand this challenging moment we're in and how to navigate and champion JEDI effectively as business leaders. So, first and foremost, the most important point is that our non-discrimination laws in the US and our Constitution have not changed since the new administration came into power. We're in a uniquely challenging time with the federal government and other actors that are hostile to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. The year started with the administration's quote unquote flood the zone strategies with nonstop executive orders and actions against JEDI, from cutting government programs and funding, firing leaders and staff, threatening businesses from engaging in practices that advance JEDI through threats of losing federal contracts and grants, and even threats of investigation. And at the state level, we're seeing a slew of anti-ESG legislation at various stages. And now here we are in a serious crisis with clearly unlawful immigration enforcement raids impacting workplaces across the country and harming hardworking people, families, and communities. Among the primary goals of all of this is to sow fear and confusion and to achieve preemptive compliance without having to change a single law. That's right, our longstanding civil rights laws in the US have not changed. The Civil Rights Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act has not changed. The US Constitution has not changed. And many states across the US also have non-discrimination laws, and some even provide greater and more expansive protections than our federal laws. So, notwithstanding the crises we're in, remember that civil and human rights must continue to be respected, including by businesses. The dust will not settle anytime soon, though. So the second point here is critical. Be prepared to navigate this moment by anchoring on your organizational values and defining your risk appetite. Many businesses are making smart shifts on messaging and thoroughly assessing the ways in which their non-discrimination practices can focus even more on implementing consistent, objective, and fair policies and practices that foster equal opportunities for all people, regardless of their background. And the JEDI standards you'll be hearing about today are an excellent starting place. Also, think about how you're readying your own teams from top to bottom to navigate this moment so that everyone is acting in alignment with your North Star. And if you're ever getting legal guidance about your efforts, always share your B Corp values and ask, how do I protect our efforts? Don't just ask, what am I allowed to do? Your counsel should always be helping you protect what you value. The third point is that misinformation and disinformation are proliferating. It's all around us, even in progressive mainstream media. So don't fall for the clickbait headlines. Don't let your colleagues take the bait. There are real setbacks with JEDI rollbacks we're seeing in businesses, but there is so much that we don't know about what is happening, and sweeping rollbacks are limited. The bigger story, what we don't hear as much about, is that most companies, even some of the largest corporations, they are continuing to do the work behind the scenes, recognizing that fair workplaces and being a good business partner and neighbor to communities is essential to long-term business success. So carefully scrutinize headlines, pause before reacting, and don't make decisions out of fear or over-index on risk aversion. The opportunity now is for businesses to shift from check the box exercises to meaningfully addressing the systems and structures that perpetuate inequity within your four walls, within the communities in which you operate, and across the economy and democracy. So that leads us to the last point here. Protect your business and your people with meaningful non-discrimination practices. Failing to do so could increase enterprise risk, including legal risk, but also reputational, talent, and market risks. Adopting JEDI practices that are connected to sound business strategy is precisely the pathway to protect yourselves. If hiring top talent, operating a fair workplace, extending your market reach, and strengthening your supply chains are important to you, then JEDI should be important to you too. So in closing, think of JEDI as simply a responsible business practice that strengthens business resilience and competitiveness while meeting the needs of your stakeholders. BLAD's JEDI standards, I'm so excited, rise above the polarization in politics. They take the guesswork out of what it means to be a responsible and fair business today, and they're grounded in fundamental civil and human rights principles. And most importantly, these standards represent a powerful agenda for you, B Corps, to continue to lead into the future. So as you listen to the overview of the standards today, think about the leadership role you want to play in bringing about a more just and equitable economy so that everyone, regardless of their background, has a fair shot to succeed by their own hard work. It's precisely in these times of uncertainty and crisis that we can reset things for a better tomorrow. And as business leaders at the forefront of the movement to transform our global economy to benefit all of us, this is your job. And there's no better community right here to lead the way. Thank you, Hughes. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Mahalet, for that powerful reminder. And I would love to reiterate, values don't disappear when things get hard. They become our compass. Your message was clear. The legal foundation for this work is intact, and companies can and should keep advancing their JEDI strategies with clarity and confidence. With that framing in mind, let's now explore how the B Corp standards help companies operationalize this commitment. I'm pleased to introduce Bernard Gao, Senior Manager of Social Standards at B-Lab Global. Bernard will walk us through how JEDI is structured within the standards, the flexibility built into implementation, and what companies of all sizes need to know. Bernard, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Hughes. A pleasure to be with you all, live from Amsterdam, the Netherlands. We're going to talk a little bit about the standards. I'm going to do my best to give you an overview and where necessary going a little bit deeper. But obviously we have the Q&A function there for a reason. So if there's anything I go through and you need clarification, please put that into the Q&A function. Before we get started, we're going to do a little exercise where one of my colleagues is going to launch a poll. We're going to go through requirements, and requirements are tailored by size. So as a reminder, we're going to do a little exercise so that you all can clarify what your company size is. So we can launch that poll. Excellent. You should be seeing it now. And whilst you're all filling that in, I can explain a little bit about this new table. So this is a different approach to the current approach in our standards version 6. In this new approach, we look at size, which is determined by either the number of workers or revenue, annual revenue, whichever is higher. So hopefully that was clear to everyone. It's whichever is higher. And the main reason we do this is to acknowledge that number of workers is just one measure. We got a lot of feedback over the past 4 years that we should consider other measures. And so looking at other options, we decided that revenue was the most suitable other one. So now we have a mix of these two. You should now be seeing the results. Fantastic. So it looks like most people were able to understand which size they are, and we have a large representation from small and medium, and we don't have any XXL. Okay, fantastic. Thank you all so much for filling that in. That's going to help contextualize the coming slides. So let's talk about justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, which is one of 7 impact topics. So each impact topic has an intent and outcome. The intent of this impact topic is that companies will measure differences between groups and gather feedback from stakeholders, as well as take action to create diverse and inclusive workplaces. When companies do that, and of course, when they meet the standard and become certified, B Corps will have inclusive and diverse workplaces and contribute to just and equitable communities. Something I want to make super clear in case it wasn't clear already, something that we're very proud of, is because we have the 7 impact topics and JEDI is one of those 7 impact topics, it means that all B Corps are required to work on this topic. Mahalat just took us through a lot of the context, particularly in that context. We wanted to make sure that this is clear to everyone here on the call. It is a very clear signal to our community and beyond that we continue seeing JEDI as a priority for our community and for wider systems change. There are, of these 7 impact topics, there are 3 social ones. They're the ones on the screen: fair work, JEDI, and human rights. Now, there's a lot of natural overlap, conceptual overlap between these 3 topics, and that's normal, that's deliberate. We can't perfectly divide and split these topics. We also have, for example, purpose and stakeholder governance of one of the other 7 impact topics, which is, touches upon basically every impact topic. So we acknowledge that there's overlap, but there's a lot of synergy and interconnectedness between these. The reason that we split them like this is because this is often how they're represented within companies or within international frameworks and standards. So for example, under fair work, there is a requirement to calculate the gender pay gap, which is, of course, fits very well within JEDI, but it's also about fair work and wages. So that's why it's captured there and not under JEDI. So let's dive into JEDI 1, the first of 2 requirements. The company collects data and collects data inform its JEDI actions. So this requirement, JEDI 1, is split into 3, what we call sub-requirements, 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. We just went over the sizes, so you can see here in the second column how the sub-requirements are tailored by size. Starting with small companies have to facilitate a 1-hour discussion about JEDI. This is recognizing that small companies have smaller workforces, so 1.2 and 1.3 wouldn't be appropriate. 1.2 and 1.3, which, as you can see, apply for medium and larger companies, larger workforces, basically enables companies to gather data in a way that's statistically significant just because there's more people, but also recognizing that in smaller companies with smaller workforces, there's a risk to worker safety. So to put it differently, with a larger workforce, there's safety in numbers, and therefore it's more feasible to collect data, particularly quantitative data about workers. Now, the main difference is, whereas JEDI 1.1 for small companies just to organize a 1-hour discussion, 1.2 and 1.3 are about gathering data related to what we call worker-related measurements, which is a bit of a mouthful, simply to say your typical human resources or people and culture measurements you are likely already doing. Things like workplace culture surveys, hiring rates, promotion rates, turnover rates. What we're essentially saying is that data you're likely already collecting, disaggregate it, by gender identity or sex at birth, and then by an additional social identity. What do we mean by additional social identity? Well, let's move to the right. We can go through those examples. So under 1.2, we'd be asking companies to disaggregate hiring rates split by, for example, men, women, non-binary workers. Then going a step further, we'd be asking companies to split the hiring rates by racial and ethnic group. Can also, for example, be people with disabilities and people without disabilities. Can really be any social identity that's relevant for your context. And just to clarify here, we have the example of hiring rate, but there's flexibility built into this. We ask for 5 worker-related measurements, but the company chooses which those measurements are. Final note at the bottom of the screen, you can see companies are not required to use the term JEDI. JEDI is a term that we use for the impact topic, but we recognize that companies use all sorts of terms, including DEI and D&I. It really doesn't matter to us. And actually, particularly given the context, particularly in the US, companies may actually choose to use different terms just to not be under the radar, not be under the, basically not to stand out for using particular terms. The standard has flexibility built into it that we don't require the use of those terms. Moving to JEDI 2. So the way that this works, JEDI 2 is the company chooses and implements JEDI actions. JEDI 1 was all about gathering information. Then using that information, here now under JEDI 2, the company chooses and implements its actions. Now, this is one of the things I'm most excited about in the new standard, something that we call informally the menu of options. It's a menu of 19 options split into 3 sets. And the company, again, there's flexibility for the company, for you all to choose what makes most sense for your context. Those 3 sets are foundational, so looking at the foundations of a company, within the workplace, relevant to the workforce, and beyond the workplace, meaning relevant to the community or consumers or broader society. Now, why do we have flexibility built in? It's because we want companies to focus on the areas that matter most to them. We, over the past 4 years, did consider, is it possible to have JEDI requirements that are truly the same universal across the world? And the answer is simply no. JEDI is about people. People are specific to their context, and therefore JEDI is a highly context-specific topic, and therefore we've integrated a lot of flexibility. And what we have in front of us, the menu of options, is the best example of that. So as I just mentioned, companies will be implementing a certain number of actions from this set of 19. So clarification, you don't have to implement all of this. You'll be choosing a certain number to complete. The breakout sessions that we have planned later on allow you to go into this a little bit deeper, but let me go through a few examples just to make this clear. So under foundation, a company may choose to, for example, commit publicly to JEDI principles. They otherwise wouldn't have to do this publicly, but this could be a choice that the company makes, and they commit publicly. An example from within the workplace, let's go for the second row, implementing inclusive hiring practice. So we, under this option, have specified exactly what that means. There are so-called compliance criteria that explains what do we mean by inclusive hiring practices. If those are met, then this option is met as well. There's a note at the bottom left. You can see options may be chosen multiple times. What we mean by this is that every audit cycle, the company can either choose new options to meet or continue meeting the same ones. So if we look at within the workplace, the third row, provide sponsorship and mentorship opportunities. In theory, what you could do as a company is if you run the sponsorship and mentorship program for, let's say, 10 years, you cross multiple audit cycles, that's fine for us. You don't need to keep changing what you select from the menu. Now, what this slide does is it summarizes the number of actions that your company needs to complete. And in line with how the rest of our standards works, the larger a company is, the more that we expect of them. Now, this is a text-based summary, but if we go to the next slide, it's a visual representation that I think works a little bit better. And you can see in the top left, loud and clear, expectations increase with size. So if we break this down, we have in the bottom left, CWW, which stands for company without workers, and micro. They are expected to complete, of that list of 19 that I just showed, between 1 and 3 of those actions per audit cycle. As the company increases in size, we expect more of them. So you can see the ones in the red, we expect between 2 and 7 actions. Now, in addition to the number of options increasing, we also expect the larger companies to choose their options based on stakeholder input, as well as the data from JEDI 1. So casting your minds back to JEDI 1, we spoke, for example, about small companies needing to facilitate a 1-hour discussion about JEDI. They would then take that information from the discussion and say, okay, this is what we heard from our workers. Based on their input, we are going to choose these 2 options from the list of 19. So that's how JEDI data from JEDI 1 would be used. And lastly, these larger companies would be expected to create an action plan. Now, this is the last slide that I have to present. As I mentioned, there really wasn't that much, but please do make use of the Q&A function to ask any follow-up questions that you have. The last thing I'll just emphasize is what I mentioned before. JEDI is an impact topic that every B Corp will be working on. So there is a degree of universality across 90+ companies where we have B Corps. They will all be working on JEDI to some degree. But as you can see, there's a lot of flexibility built into the requirements so that companies can flex and adapt to their local context. And by local context, we mean both the priority, so what is the priority, the most impactful practice for that workforce, but also recognizing, for example, changes in government legislation or other kinds of restrictions that may emerge. There's flexibility built into the sub-requirements that companies can flex and adapt as needed. All right, back to you, Hughes.
Amazing, Bernard. Thank you so much for helping us see the rigor and intentionality behind the JEDI standards. Let's now explore what that looks like in practice. I'm thrilled to introduce Maria Velasco, founder of the Beyond Inclusion Group. Maria has been supporting B Corps for years and embedding equity at every level, from executive leadership to operational strategy. She'll be sharing a case study on how one B Corp built leadership capacity and shifted culture through intentional action. Maria, over to you.
Thank you, Hughes, for the introduction, and hello, everyone. It is wonderful to be with all of you here today. My name is Maria Velasco. I'm the founder and CEO of Beyond Inclusion Group. We are a consulting firm that offers coaching and guidance to courageous leaders who want to build cultures that are inclusive and where everyone thrives and belongs. For the last 3 years, Beyond Inclusion Group has partnered with BLAB US and Canada in the Impact Improvement Program for Racial Equity, which is a program that it is designed to support companies in having a better understanding of JEDI principles and how to implement them. So today, I'm presenting a case study to showcase the steps that Rhino Foods is taking to fulfill the new JEDI requirements. So Rhino Foods was founded in 1981, and they are a leading supplier of ice cream inclusions like cookie dough, brownies, and they first got their certification back in 2013. The core principle of Rhino Foods is doing right for employees, for customers, for suppliers, for communities, and for the environment. And Rhino Foods identify through their JEDI 1 actions the need to strengthen their leaders' capacity to lead with an inclusion lens by better understanding JEDI principles. So to achieve this, they decided to work on requirement JEDI 2B2. This requirement requires companies to improve JEDI knowledge of 2 groups within the company, and companies can select the executive team, HR team, learning and development team, or the managers across the organization. So in this case, Rhino Foods selected the executive team and people and culture team. So to meet this requirement, Rhino Foods participated in BLAB's Impact Improvement Program in 2025, which just ended recently in May. The Impact Improvement Program, for those who are not familiar with it, is a comprehensive 8-week program in which participants attend weekly presentations on JEDI topics. They get together 1 hour a week in peer collaboration sessions to think through how to implement these JEDI principles, and they get support from a coach through one-on-one coaching, inclusive leadership coaching sessions to support them in widen their inclusion lens. So the results, in addition to meeting one of the JEDI requirements, which of course is very important, one of the major takeaways was that leaders had an increased capacity to identify and tackle systemic inequities within the company that maybe they were not able to identify before the program. Leaders were better able to step in discomfort to address implicit bias, to address resistance, and have difficult conversations among the executive team. They also step up and committed to diversifying their executive team to reflect the diversity of their workforce, and they got the tools and the know-how from the sessions at the Impact Improvement Program. And the last thing, they implemented additional opportunities for managers throughout the company to improve their JEDI skills. So in closing, I want to emphasize that companies don't have to meet every requirement all at once, and that often the meeting of one requirement will lead companies to think about what other requirements they will be important for them to fulfill. In this case, the fulfillment of the JEDI to be requirement led Rhino Foods to the resolution of diversifying their leadership team, thereby meeting requirement JEDI 2D, which requires companies' highest governing body and executive team to reflect the diversity of its community. Thank you, and I pass it back to Hughes.
Amazing, Maria. Thank you so much for showing how real internal transformation becomes possible when leadership is truly committed. To close out our speaker series, we turn to Michelle Reed, Senior Advisor at BDC. Michelle will take us into a Canadian context, spotlighting Cascada Seaweed, a B Corp focused on Indigenous partnership, reconciliation, and regenerative agriculture. Her work offers a critical example of how JEDI can move beyond compliance and become embedded in place-based, community-led change. Michelle, welcome.
Thanks so much, Hughes. So hello, everyone. As you know, I'm Michelle Reed. I'm the Senior Indigenous Advisor on Senior Advisor on Indigenous Reconciliation here at BDC. And at BDC, we really are a bank, a development bank whose sole mission is to support Canadian entrepreneurs. I myself am Ojibwe, and I come from the Serpent River Nation based out of Cutler, Ontario. I'm excited to be here to share a case study that explores how the JEDI principles can be applied in practice through a distinctly Canadian lens. So Cascadia Seaweed is a Canadian-based company based in British Columbia that's recognized as a leading vertically integrated ocean cultivator of seaweed. And their mission is to address climate change and food security through sustainable seaweed farming. They've been a B Corp since 2022, and their focus areas are climate action, sustainable agriculture, ocean health, and Indigenous reconciliation, which we are going to focus on today. One of the ways they do this, they advance JEDI through Indigenous partnership. They demonstrate a really strong commitment to JEDI by embedding these principles really in their core operations. Their approach is rooted in relationship-centered collaboration, and there's this real emphasis on long-term respectful partnerships with Indigenous community. So rather than engaging in extractive practices, they build trust.
Hello.
Sorry?
Okay, Ali.
So rather than engaging in extractive practices, they build trust and co-create solutions with their partners. This includes a public commitment to Indigenous reconciliation, inclusive governance that incorporates Indigenous voices on decision-making, and a real focus on economic empowerment through equitable job training. And so what this looks like in practice, they have a partnership with the Uchakwasat First Nation, and they have established seaweed farming operations. And so what they do within this is really offer training and capacity building for community members. They create long-term revenue streams through co-ownership and profit-sharing models, and strengthen local expertise in regenerative farming practices. The last 2 points I'm going to kind of combine together. It's really kind of how they center Indigenous identity and knowledge in their work. What's really important is that each nation is different, and so they really tailor their partnerships to each community's values. Again, you'll hear this common theme where there's this ongoing collaboration and also uplifting of traditional ecological knowledge and working with Indigenous-owned enterprises like the New Chatnalut Seafood Limited Partnership to operate in traditional territories and create jobs in these nations in local marine expertise. Their farming initiatives support employment, food security within their regions, and also ecosystem restoration, while at the same time honoring Indigenous stewardship and integrating cultural heritage into their environmental and economic efforts. So some of these elements that they incorporate into their business can actually be developed through a certification here that's very unique to Canada. And it's called the Partnership Accreditation in Indigenous Relations, or the PAIR certification. And this is developed by the Canadian Council for Indigenous Business. And it is actually a leading corporate social responsibility program that is exclusively focused on Indigenous relations. And there's several ways that PAIR can kind of support with JEDI 1 and JEDI 2 principles. I'll just give you a few examples. In terms of JEDI 1 in data collection, PAIR requires companies to really report on quantifiable measures of Indigenous engagement and performance, and also includes Indigenous rights holders interviews as part of their verification process. And not unlike the impact assessment, it uses an online management tool to really track progress and identify areas for improvement. In terms of action implementation, not so unlike what we're doing kind of in the B Corp movement, there has to be this demonstration of continuous improvement. And this third-party verification where you're actually reviewed by Indigenous business leaders. And this provides you kind of feedback to also implement initiatives that really promote Indigenous prosperity, such as inclusive hiring, procurement, and community investment. So these are just a few tangible ways that you can kind of look into this. And there are quite a few B Corps that are part of PAIR, including BDC. And so this really kind of offers you kind of a bit of a pathway to kind of build trust with Indigenous communities, and also upholding that really important piece of accountability and transparency, while embedding kind of the JEDI principles really in a culturally respectful and measurable way. Back to you, Hughes.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Sounds like a TV show. Back to you, Hughes. Michelle, thank you so much for that thoughtful and inspiring look at how reconciliation and Indigenous partnership can be centered in business practices. As we begin to close the formal portion of today's session, I want to offer a few ways you can take this work further beyond the slides and into your day-to-day leadership. So a few call to action and next steps that I would love to uplift. The first one is join the JEDI Beehive group, connect with peers across the B Corp network who are committed to equity and justice. Take the JEDI online course, whether you're just starting or looking to go deeper. It's a strong foundation for your team. Review and share the resources we'll be sending out after this session. These tools are designed to move you from learning to action. Shout out to our learning journey participants who are on the call. Sign up for the next iteration of the learning journey, a multi-session experience focused on embedding JEDI climate justice across your business. Visit our racial equity webpage. Shout out to my colleague, Mario Martin, who has designed that impact improvement program supporting our B Corps. It's continuously updated with relevant tools, case studies, and guidance. And of course, join networks you identify with, such as We the Change, Be Proud, BIPOC, JEDI Professionals. Next slide, please. Also, another thing to be mindful of is mark your calendar. Our next session in the Impact Collab series will be focused on the fair work impact topic. It's happening on July 24th at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, and you can register right now in the Beehive. I wish I had this thing where I can just go like this, so you can like click, but you see it right there on the slide. This session will explore what it looks like to build fair, safe, and equitable workplace across the B Corp movement, and how fair work connects directly to JEDI and broader human rights topics. And now, before we move into breakout rooms, which is the juiciest part that I love throughout this experience, we're going to take a few minutes for Q&A. This part of our session is meant to offer clarity on what's top of mind for many of you, especially as you navigate JEDI commitments amid shifting external pressures. Leading our Q&A today is my brother and friend, Max Hayes, Growth Manager in B-Lab US and Canada, who will guide us through some of your pre-submitted questions. Max, over to you.
Appreciate it, Hughes. Just want to give a big shout out to all of our speakers today. Really appreciated hearing their content, and also a big thank you to all of y'all who've been submitting questions through the Q&A. Keep them coming as we go through this Q&A specifically, but we wanted to take a moment to highlight a few pre-submitted questions and make sure folks got some clarity on some topics that we know are probably front of mind for folks. So we can jump right into our first pre-submitted question. And so this question asks, in the light of the US government's shifting stance on diversity, equity, inclusion, particularly weakening of federal protections and restrictions on contacting with vendors that embody JEDI principles, what strategic processes are being considered to sustain JEDI initiatives, measure their impact, and guide businesses in maintaining transparency while managing related risk? This is a big, juicy question here. I'll do my best to address some of this here, but if any of my other colleagues have additional insights they want to provide, please feel free to jump in. But as you heard from many of our team members and colleagues today, B-Lab US and Canada is really carefully reviewing the recent US political developments to understand their full implications. And we continue to remain committed to our mission of transforming the global economy to benefit all people, communities, and the planet. And so B-Lab US and Canada is doing this by supporting internal stakeholders with both defensive preparation as well as proactive organizing to protect civil and human rights, as well as racial equity initiatives. And so our team members are supporting events, resource sharing across the B-Lab global network, as well as within the B Corp community. So more specifically, what we're doing is we're continuing programs to educate and support B Corps in addressing racial equity, like we heard about the Learning Journey and the Impact Improvement Program today. We are also engaging with B Corps to better understand their concerns and needs. We've hosted some great sessions with some of our legal expert partners, like the folks at PolicyLink, to help B Corps understand what's happening in the changing landscape and how to determine what their risk appetite is and what to do about it. We're also collecting and distributing resources that can help communities navigate the moment. So just thinking back to what Hughes just shared with us, as well as the additional resources we'll be sending out after this session today. And we're also investing in longer-term external partners and consultants to help share findings and educate our B Corp community. And then also we're encouraging peer collaboration on the Beehive. I think that's going to be one of the best places to learn from the other members of the B Corp community and navigate this challenging and uncertain time. So again, please be sure to review the resources that we'll be sharing as a follow-up after this session, which are specifically tailored to help you navigate the specific and related risks. Appreciate those who submitted this question, and now we can move on to our next pre-submitted question here. So this question is about, considering all the new changes in the US government, will the new standards be tailored to specific countries or areas and their changing laws that affect the impact topics? I think it would be appropriate for me to kick this one back over to Bernard, who touched on this a little bit earlier in his presentation today when providing an overview of the JEDI standards and specifically that menu of options. So Bernard, if you're comfortable, would love to hear you speak a little bit to this topic again.
Sure, thanks. So this is one of the most amazing challenges of working in standards team, right? Is how do you create standards for 90 plus countries? So how do you have that universality while still acknowledging local differences, for example, in local regulation? It's a bit of a puzzle sometimes, but what we try to do is focus on global principles. So a good example is that justice, equity, diversity, inclusion are global principles. They do apply everywhere. And then from there, we craft sub-requirements, and then where needed, we can make adjustments. We have been through a 4-year process with 2 public consultations. We have thousands of people participating in that. That has allowed us to understand where are the local limitations that we need to adapt to. We've also had a legal review done by a global law firm. They assessed around, I think it was 15 different countries, looking at our draft requirements at the time, comparing it to local law to understand whether there's any real clashes. The point we're at now is we've launched the standards in April, and we feel confident that there's nothing glaring, or there's no major clashes with any local law. But obviously, if there is anything that comes up, you can let us know, and then we can look at whether changes to the standards are needed. And there's also a little bit of flexibility built into what we previously would call the verification. Maybe the new term would be the assurance process. So in discussion with the auditor will likely be a local auditor. There can be discussions about, okay, well, I can't really do this because of maybe a law change. And there's essentially a buffer built in on the kind of the one-to-one basis during the assurance process to account for these things, anything that we haven't been able to account for in the standards.
Thank you so much for that response, Bernard. It's always so great to hear about all of the work that goes in before we actually launched the standards, which, yeah, as Bernard mentioned, was a long process and required a lot of stakeholder feedback, but is part of the reason why it's so robust and it addresses this tension so specifically. So now we'll go on to our last pre-submitted question here. And this one is asking a little bit more about B-Lab's programs, trying to understand the impact that they're having. So how do programs like the Racial Equity Learning Journey help companies meet the new JEDI 2 standards, especially around implementing equity-focused actions? So for this question, I would love to pass it over back to Hughes to share a little bit more about this. I love hearing more about the learning journeys at B-Lab, and I think he'd be best equipped to share a little more insight around how it can help companies specifically meet the new JEDI 2 requirements.
Thank you so much, Max, for that question. And thank you for whoever submitted that question. You know, the learning journey supports companies in meeting JEDI 2 by building foundational understanding and leadership capacity to act on justice, equity, diversity, inclusion through interactive modules and expert-led sessions where participants not only learn the what and why of JEDI, but also how enabling them to choose meaningful actions aligned with their company context and stakeholder needs. This directly supports requirements like JEDI 2.B, as Maria mentioned during her case study, which calls for improving JEDI knowledge among leadership. Furthermore, JEDI 2 emphasizes implementing actions that are grounded in both data and stakeholder feedback. The learning journey equips leaders to interpret and that data responsibly, hold space for tough conversations, and move from performative DEI to structural transformation. It lays the groundwork for actions in areas like inclusive hiring, equitable pay practices, and internal accountability, all of which are core options within the JEDI 2 action sets. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that does. And I really love the way these 2 standards interact, JEDI 1 and 2, around having that data in place first to inform the action so that it really doesn't feel performative, and love the structure and the way that the learning journey kind of guides folks through that process. But those are all of our pre-submitted questions. Appreciate everyone who submitted questions today. Please feel free to keep throwing them into the Q&A. We'll be sure to reach out after our time today with not only the slides, but also a Q&A document where you can see all the answers to the questions that were submitted, as well as these pre-submitted questions as well. But that ends the Q&A portion, and now we're going to gear up to move over to the breakout rooms. And I believe I'll be passing it back over to Hughes to help set a little context before we shift to the breakout rooms and hear a little bit more about what we'll be doing in there.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you again, Max, for that robust follow-up on those questions. And again, if you have further questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat and we'll be sure to get them answered for you. Before we shift into breakout rooms, I want to take a moment to set the stage. We know we won't have all the answers, so I just want to name that up front, especially when it comes to assurance model or how shifting political landscapes may continue to evolve. But what we do have is a community of values-aligned businesses, and this is your chance to lean into that. These rooms are designed to help you learn more about the specific JEDI actions available to you, connect with other B Corps who are walking a similar path, and collaborate, share ideas, and offer support. We invite you to stay on, turn your camera on if possible. and really be present with one another. This is a space for real-time exchange, human to human, business to business, rooted in trust and intention. The breakout rooms will be our final gathering. So upon the completion of that, we will be logging off. So please use this opportunity to really connect with each other, learn from each other, grow with each other, and stay on this journey and path together. That being said, let's begin opening up our breakout rooms.